Welcome to the Are We Idiots Show, where we question the status quo on society's important issues while mixing in plenty of laughs along the way. Now here are your hosts, Mark Weaver and Rich Kroll.
Whoa, Nelly! We're going to have an episode today. How old do you have to be to imitate Keith Jackson?
I don't know, but that was a great way to start.
Welcome, everyone, to another edition of the Are We Idiots Show. We are your hosts, Rich Kroll and Mark Weaver.
In the house. How are you today, Mark?
Good. We're going to have an episode today. This could get lively. Rich I lit his flame a few weeks back with the NFL referees, but I think when we combine a topic of social media, millennials, and bad parenting, it's a toxic mix that may get ignited. We may hear a Kroller rant.
I may throw one of your bottles of scotch I'm looking at right through the window today.
So looking forward to it. And on our show, by the way, do you have any tip of the day or anything?
I do.
Oh, okay, there we go.
All right, so, we've had a show on diet, nutrition, exercise, weight loss, and a lot of people called me from that show. Thousands. It took me a while to answer all the inquiries. But Rich, Mr. Rich, I'm starting to get called Mr. Rich, Sensei Rich. How do I get 70 helpings of vegetables and fruits in every day? How do I follow the right diet to help my heart and my blood pressure and type 2 diabetes and inflammation? Great question, I said.
Maybe you should do a separate podcast just on that, like Ask Rich podcast or something.
That would be great. We can do that. So here's my little tip for all you people out there. Here's a little quick hit elixir that'll tighten your body right up. So one of the things we often neglect, and I even forgot to bring it up, is besides your traditional fruits, vegetables, lean proteins, there's a lot of spices on the spice rack. I'm not talking about, salt.
Garlic's very good.
Garlic and all this stuff.
Wards off vampires.
Yeah,
werewolves.
It does. All that stuff. But guys, if you want a quick hit that'll reduce inflammation, it will improve your immune system, it will help you with blood sugar and heart function, and even possibly kill many forms of early stage cancer. Whip this together. Grab a little pinch of turmeric. That you're familiar with, the orange stuff in Indian foods.
Is it turmeric?
Whatever, it's spelled turmeric. Turmeric.
Glenmorangie.
Still love that. Add a little cayenne pepper.
Okay.
Add a little cinnamon. And then throw in...
That'll clean you out.
And then throw in ACV. And not annual contract value, Mark.
Okay.
Apple cider vinegar.
Okay.
Add 8 ounces of water to it. So, again,
where did this concoction come from?
You can get...
Where'd you think of it?
I've been reading a lot,
okay.
and I'm in a hurry, and I don't have time to eat all the right, so I threw this together. Turmeric, cinnamon, cayenne pepper, an ounce of apple cider vinegar, throw it in 8 ounces of water, mix it up. Doesn't taste great.
Snort it.
Snort it. Put it in an ear funnel and a suppository. Gun that concoction, and you'll be lively and healthier.
That'll clean you out. I gotta try that. Okay, just a little update, by the way, on our goals, Richie. I'm at 3.2 miles per day, going through 22 days of February plus 31. What's that? 53 days of the year so far. So walking 3.2 miles a day, and I'm done my first book.
Very impressed.
Going to start my second book.
But there's been a big gap between your first and second book already.
A couple of weeks. That's because I blistered through one book, which we're going to talk about later today. And by the way, before we go into the agenda, just a reminder, we are up and going with Patreon. You can go to Supporting Listeners tab on our website and look at all the support options there. There's for ongoing support, there's Patreon. There's lots of other ways you can support our show, platinum, gold, and silver sponsorships. And we'd appreciate if you consider that. As far as on the show today, we're going to have Idiots of the Week. And I'm going to try to do that quickly, Rich, because I think we're going to have a long discussion around helicopter parenting. And then we're going to conclude the show with some bad celebrity parents, which should should be fun.
Should be an endless supply of that.
So real quickly, Rich, so we can get on to our helicopter parents discussion, I have two quick nominees for Idiot of the Week. And I could have easily gone to two people that have been in the news. Jesse Smollett, which I won't go into.
I thought he would be.
No, I could have gone into that. It's too easy. He's an obvious Idiot of the Week. And before that, a few days before, our ignominious leader, President Trump, declared a national emergency about the wall. And in his announcement of the national emergency, he said, quote, "I don't need to do this." So those were two obvious ones that I could have done, but I like to go a little off the radar and something with a little bit of fun. All right. A vegan bride-to-be's unusual wedding stipulation is going viral after she revealed that she's uninvited all meat eaters to the ceremony, including her own mother.
Really?
The 20-year-old Australian woman wrote in a now viral post on Facebook called Vegan Revolution that she's banned all omnivores from her wedding ceremony, including her own family. Quote, "Some family members were told they are not invited to my wedding because we don't I can't read today.
What is wrong with
Because
you?
we don't want to host murderers.
So
Our wedding is supposed to be one of the happiest days of our lives," the woman said about her banned family members. And by the way, not only her mother, but her two cousins, which were slated to be bridesmaid. So what do you think of that, Richie? She's calling people that eat meat or omnivores murderers.
look, I'm all for veganism, vegetarianism, not eating meat. I think it's smart. I don't eat red meat, or I try not to. I do eat chicken, turkey, poultry, fish. But, considering taking a cow or a pig out of its own misery, who wants to be a pig in this world, so that people can have meat, and calling them murderers, that's the problem I have. She's probably one of those she takes care of her dog and her cats better than her own children kind of person. So when people, hey, animals are important. I love dogs, I love cats, I love fish, I love, even your pet boa constrictor. But they're not humans, people. They're not humans.
How about the sheer fact that have a little tolerance for an alternative viewpoint? I mean, aren't people free to do what they need to do? It's not against the law. I mean, just because you don't agree with someone, you can't be in their presence. I mean,
Well, and I don't agree with
lunatic fringe.
the safari guys, Tarzan types with the rifles that are taking out majestic animals like lions.
Right, it's abhorrent.
And elephants just for their tusks. That is kind of murder, but it's still not really murder as far as human murder is concerned. So
Right.
she's off to a good start as idiot nomination number one.
All right, second one. Hopefully I can read this a little better.
Please do.
A second coming of Jesus Christ will just have to wait. DC Comics decided to cancel the release of a comic book titled Second Coming that featured Jesus as a sidekick of a superhero named Sunman, following a wave of backlash from online critics who labeled the book blasphemous. The 32-page comic is centered on Jesus' return to Earth and teaming up with the Sunman to complete his, quote, most holy mission by God and learn what it takes to be the true Messiah of mankind. A petition was launched by Citizen Go, an online platform that promotes campaigns geared towards defending religious liberty, calling on the publisher to cancel the series after the creator said in an interview that Christ was sent back to Earth because, quote, God was so upset with Jesus' performance the first time.
That is interesting.
So more than 234,000 people have signed the petition to date, saying the comic book was inappropriate and portrayed Jesus as, quote, a clueless superhero sidekick.
Wow.
So what do you think of those two nominations? Definitely off the beaten track, Richie.
Well, let's evaluate Jesus' performance for a minute. So back in a time where there was no social media, no television, no radio, no printed material, a guy probably 5'6", Arabic-looking guy walking around curing people, healing people, somehow managed to get 3 billion followers 2,000 years after his death. I would say that's a pretty successful run based on the technology and lack of resources he had at the time.
So a pretty good performance his first time around.
I would give him an A.
What would they think would be a good performance?
Right. We all walked into the ocean and died at the same time. So, gosh, they're both idiots. But you know what? If somebody doesn't want their family to eat meat at their wedding, okay, that's her choice. Any guy that's trying to recreate a comic book off of Jesus and a sun god sidekick, sun man, is
I should have showed you the picture. It's hysterical.
Idiot and moron of the week.
All right, maybe you can send him a loaf of bread and some fishes instead of the dollar.
$1's worth of fish and bread.
All right, so we're going to talk about helicopter parents, and as I've confessed on this show, I don't read a lot of books, but I did read this book called The Coddling of the American Mind. The subtitle is How Good Intentions and Bad Ideas Are Setting Up a Generation for Failure. And I was enthralled by this book. I even read it at a normal pace, which is something for me.
What was that, a month and a half?
But so I turned Richie onto it, and even before we did this show, he hadn't listened to it or read it, but he did consume it over the last week.
Less. And I read it in a weekend. It took you 6 weeks.
Maybe so. And then, so we're going to talk about that today. So let's just delve into a couple of first impressions. Before we go into kind of all the issues of the book, first impressions on reading the book. Did it exceed your expectations? Did it surprise you in any way? What are the things that kind of jumped out before we get into all the minutia of the book?
Two things. One, I don't want the audience to think we're basing a joint opinion on a single book, The Coddling of the American Mind, by Greg Lukianoff and Jonathan Haidt. This is not a sole-sourced, opinion-based show. I've been studying and reading at this topic for a decade. So just want to let people know this is a lot more research than just this book. The book impressed me on a couple levels. One, it's infuriating the level of insanity in college campuses today that I didn't realize to the length that it's going on.
Right.
I mean, beyond, and we'll get into it, right?
Right.
So that was educational and surprising and eye-opening for me. Like, oh my gosh, this isn't just some one liberal college in Maine or in, smoking dope on the beaches of California. They cited probably 20 separate examples, all sorts of universities and colleges. What I really thought was smart was let's identify the problem. Let's categorize it. Very, very detailed way, but let's also provide solutions. And they addressed all the problems and then how they could potentially be fixed. And they threw in common sense, which, I love. So overall, thumbs up. And I learned a lot.
And good. And I learned a lot because I like, as you know, Rich, I like to question the status quo. I like to find out why I like the forensic nature of it because I think all of us have observations about how things are, but not a lot of people go back and say, well, why are they that way? And I do that a lot with a lot of different subjects on this show. But
to a fault.
I don't think so. I think it's a very good...
Why would you think so?
That's probably true. But you know what I liked about it is because you've ranted for a long time about millennials and why they act a certain way. And again, we're generalizing. We realize there are exceptions to this, and there's lots of things. But generations get stereotyped in certain ways, and for a lot of times there's some reasons behind it. But I really love the way that they broke it down and pointed back to the parenting techniques and the direct link to why some of these stereotypes now exist. And so let's get into that a little bit.
Oh, and one thing I will give a shout out. Millennials are a little bit off the hook in this case. The book was most focused on iGen, the internet generation, which is really the cause of all these college uproars, which are people born, I believe, 1995 and after.
That's true for some of the aspects of it, but there are broader accusations, for lack of a better term, that apply to millennials or not. And let's start with this, because this is one of my things. I think we both took different things from the book. My main takeaway from this book was this culture of safetyism, is what they refer to. And I have older kids than you do, Rich, so I've noticed this for probably longer than you have. And frankly, within our own house, I have a little bit of a different posture on liberty for my kids than my wife does. So she's a little bit more towards protection, and I'm a little bit more towards, as you know, I hold liberty as a primary value, and I would want my kids to have a lot of liberty and experiences the ups and downs of life, and I think that's all part of growing up. It's like weightlifting, right? You have to have your body in good form and as strong as it can be. You have to lift weights, and that to be able to deal with the ups and downs of life, you have to go through ups and downs and deal with trauma and deal with stress and all that stuff. So this culture of safetyism is something they bring out in the book, and there's so many examples. We're not going to be able to do the book justice, but the one thing that really struck me was this Adam Walsh. Remember in the book he talks about?
Yep.
Adam Walsh was, for the listeners, if you're not familiar, the guy John Walsh started America's Most Wanted. It was a horrific story where his son Adam was abducted at a very young age and killed. And it's an awful, awful, awful story. But John Walsh went on this campaign, and God bless him, he's certainly able to do that, and that was his passion. And he started America's Most Wanted. And then he also was a key person to put missing children on milk cartons. And what the book talks about is that was a seminal moment, because more shows started coming out saying about missing and exploited kids and what have you. And what they point out is that even though it is tragic when these outlier events happen, and they do, because of the media attention, it became a norm, and people thought, well, wow, my kids are going to get abducted. And what they didn't stipulate was most of the people on these kids on these milk cartons were actually taken by someone that knows them. It's not a stranger danger. People don't realize that 90% of the kids on those milk cartons are abducted by, a bad divorce or some kind of bad domestic situation, had nothing to do with a stranger taking them. So, what did you think about that? And there's other examples we can talk about on safetyism.
So I'm torn a little bit. In general, I think safetyism is a problem, but I think there's varying degrees. So I read further, deeper than that. I mean, there was also an example of a mother who let her 9-year-old take the subway into New York City and back or something, and he made it. Yeah. But
I've done that.
Okay, when you were 9?
No, I've done it with my kids. We let Grant take the R5 or the regional rail back when he was about 9 or 10
from where?
From Center City.
Okay,
and they made it home.
But the point is this: some things I'm going to be protection. And Grant's a big boy, a big, tough-looking kid. So
well, he was 9 or 10 then.
He's still a big 9, 10-year-old versus a petite, scared 8 or 9-year-old girl. So I think if we take generalizations on this topic, there can be a lot of arguments. I took safetyism to mean where we've gone overboard as a society and as parents, saying, okay, not only will I not let you travel anywhere by yourself or let you out of my sight, which I think is not a bad thing. Malls, I don't know that I would let my little girl travel on a train by herself. I'm going to be protective, maybe more with a girl than a boy, and I don't know what age. But when it comes down to cutting their meat on their plate, right? We've gone crazy where now we're going to protect kids even from scraping their knee or scratching their finger. It's not just about being worried about being abducted. It's, I can't let you 9-year-old cut your own meat because you might cut your finger. That's where I think we've gotten absolutely crazy.
Well, what about unsupervised play? I think that's another part of the book that I think is rampant. Parents don't trust their kids to have unsupervised play.
It's horrible and it's a mistake. Yeah. Now, I don't want...
Because they work out problems there amongst other kids.
Well, I'm not going to drop a group of kids in a field 20 miles away from me and then, go get them 12 hours later. But having play dates, having kids over, playing in the house, playing in the yard, playing at a playground nearby, playing in the street, throwing a football, all the stuff we did, I think is critical to raising a kid properly and not having a helicopter parent sitting in the room supervising everything, because they've proven kids like to play and be imaginative and create their own little kids' court and choose leaders and resolve disputes amongst themselves, and they do it incredibly well on their own.
Right.
They behave differently when there's parents,
Playing
hovering
referee.
over them and playing referee, and that's where we've gotten crazy.
Okay, and then the other thing that they talked about there, which I tend to remember, was, that they put an example of this peanut allergy craze, and how unintended consequences of this, and if people are listening, they remember 20 so years ago, it was this peanut allergy thing came on, and schools weren't allowed to have anything peanut in it. Airlines still today don't have anything peanut in it because of these kids that have peanut allergies. And the thinking, wrong thinking, for many, many years was you have to sanitize everything to not expose these kids to peanuts. And what the most recent research is that was wrong. Everyone was wrong for 20 years of saying you gotta cleanse the whole world of peanuts because they could kill these kids. And what really is the solution is you expose kids to peanuts at very low doses from the time they're, and it used to be, I remember this, they told us you couldn't give peanuts to your kids or peanut butter to your kids in the first 2 years of life. That's what we were told when our kids were young.
Absolutely ridiculous.
I know.
I'm still pissed off at the airlines because I used to love my little peanut snack, and now they only give you pretzels and biscuits. I don't eat any of that crap. So I miss the peanuts on airplanes. Listen, it goes a lot further than just peanut insanity, right?
Vaccines now.
And I also was on the bandwagon 20 years ago. A friend of mine had an autistic child, and they couldn't figure it out for the life of them. And I raised my hand and said, hey, you might want to look into vaccines and the mercury that they're preserving vaccines in. Maybe that's the cause.
That was refuted.
Correct. It's been heavily refuted.
Right.
But 20 years ago, I threw that out there as something you might want to look into. And then Jenny McCarthy and Jim Carrey
Crazy people.
ran with it based on this doctor out of the UK that's been completely debunked as wanting to create fame for himself and then sticking by it once the data came in that he was wrong.
Right.
And then, even hand sanitizer.
Yep.
Right.
Yep.
So
People still probably haven't gotten that message.
I'll use it once in a while. If I go shake the hands with 30 people at a business meeting, I'm going to use hand sanitizer. But every single time I touch a doorknob and a piece of trash, I'm not hand sanitizing because it's actually also killing the immune system's ability to be introduced at a small amount of germs and viruses that the body can handle. And by eliminating that, we're also creating new strains of viruses and sicknesses, as well as the vaccines is a big one because, could a vaccine hurt somebody? Possibly, but statistically, it was like 1 out of 1 million. And now, communicable diseases that have been basically eradicated over the last 100 years, like measles, mumps, rubella, they're all making comebacks. Right. And I'll tell you, it's dangerous if you're a teenager who's never been vaccinated. It's more dangerous to catch some of these diseases later in life. So agreed, the safetyism is now causing more problems than it's helped the few people that were actually going to be impacted negatively from peanuts or a vaccine or a germ, et cetera, et cetera.
Right. And so the point of this book is that the parents are hovering. The parents are afraid of a person their child being physically damaged in the case of being kidnapped from some stranger danger, emotionally damaged because they're interceding in these disagreements and fights. And then the other thing is parents of our generation, again, baby boomers mostly, are also concerned that they're going to fall behind, and so there's a big theme in the book about how unsupervised play is being taken away for scheduled appointment-based free time. to try to get into college, right? And this will lead into our college discussion in a second. But the other malfeasance of like that
great word.
The other malfeasance of parents in today's generation is that they're afraid of kids missing out on building a college resume. And I have a whole different perspective on education now than I did when my kids were younger, and we won't go into it on this show. But what do you think about that, Richie? The obsession of parents to maximize education, maximize outside activities, maximize skills in the hopes of getting your kid into Harvard.
Again, the intentions started out positively, but they've gotten completely out of control. I was going through a bookshelf this morning, and we even have a book, something to the effect of, Tiger Moms, like the Asian folks that have
Right.
a proven successful methodology to maximize and optimize their kids' IQ and their cognitive ability and their ability to take tests and get higher grades, which then ultimately leads them to getting into better colleges. Well, we've gone cuckoo, right? It also leads to sports. Right now, poor little kids are wrestling or playing hockey or lacrosse or gymnastics year-round, 365 days.
Yep.
And they're showing that kids are developing more injuries from overuse of the same exact muscle groups where you and I grew up playing 2, 3, 4 sports. You become better overall physically, more well-rounded. All your micro muscles and tendons, everything's being activated to reduce injury. And then, kids are burning out. They're quitting. Hey, Dad, I'm 13. I don't want to wrestle anymore. Hey, Dad, I'm 14. I don't want to play, soccer anymore because I'm doing it year round and I'm bored of it. Same thing with these Tiger Moms or
Right.
Tiger Dads, where before, kindergarten, preschool was all play, right? And first, second, third grade was, light learning, very little homework, more interactive play in the playground,
Right.
Unsupervised play.
Right.
Now, we're teaching kids how to read in preschool. And then the answer was, the great example in the book was, well, why are we doing that? So they'll be ready for kindergarten.
Yeah. Yeah.
I think one
It's
of the
insanity.
one of the points of the book was across all safetyism and overprotection and helicopter mania, the initial intentions were good.
Yeah. But it's unintended consequences, like a lot of things in life. I'll get on my government rant.
No, don't do that.
Okay, I won't do it. All right, so let's move to your hot button issue, Rich, college, right? And the reality is that this culture of safetyism, this hovering of parents to not let kids deal with adversity, fear, taking risks, all of the things that have built up to this. And then the kids go on their own, and inevitably they run into someone at college that disagrees with them. And mommy and daddy are not there to protect them in their cocoon. And guess what? Surprisingly, the kids can't handle it. And so now, and the book goes into a lot of detail, and this was probably my favorite part of the book, is this current theme on a lot of campuses, most college campuses. And let's face it, most colleges are run by the liberal elite, and most professors are extremely liberal. And I think it's kind of ironic because when we were growing up in the 60s and 70s, the liberals were the ones that were the protectors of free speech. And you and I have had debates about free speech and its limits on another show. But what's happened now is the left has now become the intolerant of free ideas and free speech, and speech has been deemed violence. This is crazy. This is where I as we go back to the free speech show, I wig out when it comes to this, where speech becomes violence. When someone disagrees with you and hurts your feelings, that is deemed violence. So what do you think on this whole subject, Richard?
Now you're getting me started. Sticks and stones can break your bones, but names can never hurt me. What has happened? Right? Meet the Fockers. Right? So my little boy is not as smart or not as athletic, but I don't want to feel him to feel left out or like a failure, so I'm going to give him a 10th place medal. What are you kidding me? There's winners and losers, right? There's A's and B's, and there's D's and F's.
Right.
And if you don't prepare your kids for wins and losses, how to win gracefully, how to lose gracefully, how to overcome adversity, you're creating an insanity. And you're right. The irony is all the left-wing liberal colleges and professors, which I respected, and my dad was a professor, who created a great environment around free speech, are now taking that same environment and saying, oh, no, we got to protect and limit certain types of speeches or written words or people that oppose your ideas or even people you completely disagree with. They're not allowed to be heard if it causes you any angst.
Right.
Right? It's insane to me.
Emotional fragility.
So,
you like that?
I did like that. I like malfeasance better, though.
Okay.
So the book made a good point. It said, here's the problem. When we grew up, college was $5 grand, 10 grand, 15 grand a year, whatever, for the big, important, prestigious colleges. Now, even normal, quote, normal colleges are 50, 60 grand a year. So universities and colleges have, in essence, become incorporated corporations that need to take care of their consumers.
Customers, right. Yeah.
Therefore, the customer's always right. The consumer's always right.
Right.
So if you complain about there's not enough free-range salmon in the lunchroom, everybody panics. Right?
Why don't you have a rock wall?
Put up a rock wall. Oh, we need a safe area with hand squishies so that people...
And counselors on duty in case Ben Shapiro comes and speaks.
24/7. You have to have places where you can sleep and not be bothered by anybody. It's insane, but they've created their own problem, right? If you're going to spend $250 grand for a college education, you better kiss their ass.
Right. And the book goes into a lot of detail of how not only the campus administration, which are afraid and trying to protect their jobs, and they are, horrible at just drawing a line and making a decision and standing for values. They're just petrified. But also the media, who, let's be honest, the majority of the mainstream media is of a left persuasion, and they don't want to hear, it's largely conservative speech. I'm not saying there aren't examples where liberal speech or progressive speech is also being limited, but for the most part, colleges are leftist, and the problem is that conservative speakers are being canceled and shunned and protested and screamed at to try to limit their speech, and disinvited, and safe spaces and counselors on call because we might hear something that we don't agree with. And that's just a brutal, brutal trend in society that the book points out.
So I'll take your irony to the next level of insanity.
Go for it.
So the liberals that promoted free speech through the last 273 years of our great country are now limiting free speech to protect their consumers.
Right.
But liberal mentality and philosophy, also famous for being passive, non-aggressive, whether it's
anti-war.
Gandhi,
They used to be anti-war, too.
Anti-war, anti-violence. Gandhi, Martin Luther King, the Dalai Lama, right? On and on and on. The next level of these protests against certain speakers coming into the colleges and universities or trying to suppress free speech and not having anything that could inflame one's mind, in order to execute that, if they couldn't get it done just verbally or in a passive way, now the liberals are forming mobs in colleges. They're even wearing masks to protect their identity, and they've physically attacked and assaulted people, and even captured professors or speakers, and basically,
put them in physical harm.
Put them in physical harm,
Right.
or in like ransom situations, like kidnappings.
Pelted their cars with stuff.
Pelted their cars.
Yep.
I mean, it's
Craziness.
Think about that level of irony.
So what do we do then, Rich? I mean, hey, I'm a father of 5. I certainly don't pretend to have all the answers of being a wonderful parent. We're trying our best every day. It's the hardest job you'll ever have, being a parent. I certainly don't have all the answers, but my goal and my wife's goal has always been to raise educated, independent adults. And I honestly can't think of a worse legacy than to have my kids fearful and dependent on protection. I just, if they had that as their primary values of being afraid to hear other people's opinion, not being able to articulate their own opinion and stand up and articulate their thoughts, and try to limit the speech of someone else to protect them from emotional damage, I think I'd be the worst parent in the world. And that's seemingly where these colleges are focused. And I can't think of a worse thing. Now, I know I'm an outlier in a lot of ways, but I can't think of a worse thing for my kid.
I agree with you. The only thing I would pull a little bit back on, and maybe I'm a little more protective. First, I agree with you 100% in all categories, check, except for, I have a little blonde-haired daughter, really cute, a little naive, I would say, in some respect. Hasn't grown up to the maturity level of some other 9 and 10-year-olds. I'm not going to let her go to the mall, walk around the mall for 3 hours and come back and get her, or take a train home from Philly. I don't trust that situation. Not that I won't have a little more, go down to the mailbox, we'll walk 2 blocks down to the mailbox and come back with the mail and stuff like that. So I think there are some situations you got to be careful of depending on the gender and the type of person somebody is.
Well, I don't agree on the difference in boys and girls, because I had boys and girls. I wouldn't treat them any differently.
Show me one girl that can beat up a boy, except for Ronda Rousey.
Well, when you're 9 years old, it doesn't matter. A 9-year-old boy can't defend himself against
any boy can beat up any girl unless they have a black belt or they're a trained professional.
That's simply not true. But whatever. Okay, so here's my thing, right? So if this is where the world is going, and it's been a trend for years, how do we reverse this? How do these fringe people like Jonathan Haidt and this guy Greg, and there's another movement out there called Free Range Kids. They started this other group called Let Grow. So there are some fringe people trying to speak out against the damage that's being done by these parental philosophies. How does this change?
I actually think it's much simpler than meets the eye, but the parents have to have some balls. Meaning, listen, every kid isn't a star athlete or a straight A student or musically gifted or artistic or have the ability to speak in public. And you're going to make it worse if you don't give them a shot at it. And you don't know, I don't think anybody knows what their kid's good at when they're 3, 4, 5 years old. So don't protect them from failure. Fear of failure, to me, is the number one problem children have. And if you don't expose them to wins and losses and trying to make the uncomfortable comfortable, right? That's the Navy SEALs tagline.
Right.
You have to make the uncomfortable comfortable, because when the S hits the fan, you got to be able to handle it, right? So for me, there are winners and losers. That's why you play the game. And if taught properly, the losing can be motivating to come back and try to win. And there's no time frame on it. You may lose, 3 straight years in a row, like I did playing varsity basketball at Hereford High, for God's sake. But I kept wanting to come back till I finally got that win. Or you may not get an A. You may get a B or a C. You might even fail a very difficult class that's above your pay grade as a student, but you got to know and try. Have your kids get up and speak in public. Yeah. Have them do a speech. Have them do a book report. Have them stand up on stage and be in a play or play the trumpet, something. And you know what? If they fail miserably and they clam up and they run off crying, hug them and just say, that was so incredible.
You'll do better next time.
You'll do better next time.
And there will be a next time, because you'll make them do it again.
And make them do it again. And then, you know what, parents? If your kid is a Fokker and he's going to come in 10th place or last place every time, find something else.
Exactly. And by the way, parents, don't automatically assume the worst in every scenario. And that I think is a big problem, where these outlier events, like the Adam Walsh type of situation, it's like the same principle as why you shouldn't be afraid of getting on an airplane. Yeah, I guess periodically an airplane crashes and everyone dies, but that shouldn't stop you from getting on an airplane. You shouldn't be paralyzed by fear. It's the same thing about stranger danger. Your kid's not going to get abducted. Your kid's not going to get shot in a school. It's an extreme rare event. You shouldn't spend your time worried about something that will probably never, ever happen in 40 generations in your family. So stop focusing on what might happen and assuming the worst. And this culture of fear and culture of safetyism is causing your kids to be emotionally fragile and fearful in later life.
I agree, but I would word it slightly differently. I wouldn't, because unfortunately, that the guy that says, okay, and he's the one that kid gets abducted or his kid gets shot in school, I would word it this way.
On.
Would you let me finish? I'm actually agreeing with you in a different way.
Not really. You're saying don't be aware of that one outlier event.
You interrupted me, and you're completely going to apologize when I'm finished my sentence. I wouldn't word it that it's not going to happen. I would simply word it this way. Hey, look, folks, it can happen. It clearly has. Look at the school in Connecticut or Columbine or America's Most Wanted. It does happen. However, it happens less than 0.1% of the time, so you can't live the majority of your life, the 99.99999, in expectation of that outlier 0.00001 event. Otherwise, you will paralyze everybody. Yes, it can happen, but we don't spend our lives and make decisions based on the 100th of 1%.
Unfortunately, I think people do, and that's the problem. If people assume it would happen, what has happened over the last 25 years is people say, well, it's better to be safe than sorry. And that's what's caused this problem.
Correct.
Is people are
paralyzed.
Don't
live that way.
But they are living that way. When they assume it could happen, then they can't. People don't think in probability like probably you and I do, right? And that's the problem, is people can't think in probability and weight things appropriately. They think, well, it could happen, you know. And this is what happens in the political realm. People also govern. They say, well, did you see those billionaires that stole money during the financial crisis? So now all billionaires are bad. I mean, this is what happens, you know. And same thing on the other side. Trump say, well, you know, there's these Mexican criminals coming in through the border. Well, yeah, there was probably some bad people coming in through the border. There's probably bad people on the Mayflower, right? There's bad people, a certain small percentage of the population in every
so you
realm.
can't say it doesn't happen.
I know.
You have to put it in proper context.
But people can't do that, it seems.
We'll teach them how.
How? On this show?
Yes.
All right. Summary on this book and this topic, Richie, and then I'll summarize.
All right, so you got to give me an extra minute in my summary because I can't summarize it any better than the Chief Justice of the United States.
John Roberts. I love that. I love that.
And this is his opinion aligns 100% with mine. So let me not reinvent the wheel here. In June 2017, John Roberts, the Chief Justice of the U.S., was invited to be the commencement speaker at his son's graduation from middle school.
I love it.
He wishes for his son's classmates to have the sorts of painful experiences that will make them better people and better citizens. Here's an excerpt. Folks, listen to this closely, especially if you have children under the age of 30.
You can go back and replay it again multiple times.
From time to time in the years to come, I hope you will be treated unfairly so that you will come to know the value of justice. I hope that you will suffer betrayal because that will teach you the importance of loyalty. Sorry to say, but I hope you will be lonely from time to time so that you don't take friends for granted. I wish you bad luck, again, from time to time.
I love that.
So that you will be conscious of the role of chance in life and understand that your success is not completely deserved and that the failure of others is not completely deserved either. And when you lose, as you will from time to time, I hope every now and then your opponent will gloat over your failure. It is a way for you to understand the importance of sportsmanship. I hope you'll be ignored so you know the importance of listening to others, and I hope you will have just enough pain to learn compassion. Whether I wish these things or not, they're going to happen, and whether you benefit from them or not will depend upon your ability to see the message in your misfortunes.
That's just magical. That is wisdom personified right there. I love it. Now, what am I going to do for my closing? No, just kidding. So my summary thoughts are this. Parents, your job is not to protect your kid. Your only job is not to protect your kids. The goal in life should not be just to have your kids survive in a bubble, right? Your goal should be to raise independent, intelligent, self-sufficient adults, and happy, hopefully, as well. So the two phrases that stood out to me, which I thought were kind of clever in the book that I'd like to leave the listeners with, are this: prepare the child for the road and not the road for the child, which I think is so true. A lot of parents try to move everything out of the way, protect their child, protect them from physical harm, emotional harm, make sure they don't get their feelings hurt, make sure they get a 10th place trophy so they feel good about themselves. Everything's great. They're great. They'll never fail. They can do whatever they want in life. All this stuff is bad for the child ultimately. The second one, which was you have to think about a little bit, which I love it, is don't just do something, stand there. And of course, the old phrase was don't just stand there, do something, right? So resist the temptation, parents, of always wanting to intercede and help out and protect. Stand back. Let your kids experience life. Let them experience some trials. Let them get poor grades. Here's a personal story. I was a big believer that we shouldn't help our kids with homework. When I say never, I'm not saying never, but largely we would let them do their homework. My wife was always tempted to try to help them get a better grade. I'm like, no, it's more important for them to learn self-sufficiency and the lesson of what their input is equals their output in life, and to be able to realize that rather than in the short term in preschool or K through 12 getting better grades. And so that's just one example of many examples that we have where we have to just let your kids do something. And different parents have different philosophies. I understand that. But resist the temptation of being involved and helicoptering your kids. Dilly dilly?
Dilly dilly. Whoa, Nelly.
Whoa, Nelly. Okay. So we'll finish up the show with some examples of some bad celebrity parents, Rich, and feel free to jump in and comment or editorialize.
I will.
Parent number one, Alec Baldwin. He left an infamous voicemail for his 11-year-old daughter, Ireland, with who was the Kim Basinger, right? It was his wife.
Kim Basinger.
Basinger, Glenn Marangy. So he said, quote, "You're a rude, thoughtless little pig." Going on to say, you don't have the brains or the decency as a human being. Alec Baldwin, who, by the way, is a very funny guy. But what are your thoughts on him?
Great actor, funny guy, but also a hot-tempered. He's been caught being an idiot in public and assaulting people and being, very brash. You can't call your little girl a pig. You shouldn't even call women in general a pig. Even if come on. So
that's not in the parenting rule book?
That's definitely not in the rule book.
Woody Allen.
Oh.
Married his stepdaughter, who was 35 years his junior.
That little weasel. You know what?
That's sickening is what it is.
And you know why he did? Because he was a little Weasley nothing who couldn't get women on his own. So he went and got the one girl that trusted him. It's horrific.
Isn't it? All right. Michael Jackson. Now, I could spend the next 40 minutes explaining why he was a bad parent. But the incident that I remember most was he dangled his infant son over a high-rise balcony in Berlin so that his adoring fans could see him. Do you remember that?
Yes.
Was that one of the most horrifying things you've ever seen in your life? Now, he probably had a good hold on the kid, but it didn't look like it. And so, Michael Jackson, any thoughts there?
Well, he's an example. He's an example of the most polar, dichotomous human beings I know. Arguably the greatest entertainer that the world's ever seen.
Right.
Yet he was inviting little kids over to Never Never Land or whatever that place was.
Right.
And having kids sleep in his bed, and God knows what else he was doing to them, because he was a weirdo,
right,
as far as a personality goes, if you really break it down, with all the cosmetic surgery and the lightening of his skin. And so, great entertainer, love him dearly. I'll dance to his music every single time. And, yeah. A freak.
Courtney Love, Rich, admitted to doing heroin while pregnant and lost custody of daughter Frances after an Oxycontin overdose.
Sure. Well, it hasn't really been officially proven that drinking bottles of vodka and doing opioids and other types of heroin will impact an unborn fetus. But I'm not also eating. I'm not drinking, Drano and liquid detergent,
Which might be better than heroin.
It's seriously, some people are. You know what it is? It's being selfish, caring about yourself.
All right, two quick ones. A combo of Bobby Brown and Whitney Houston, which are the worst parenting couple, I think, in the last 30 years. Bobby Christina was their daughter. Had to witness them doing crack together at age 5. She saw that. Both parents were in and out of rehab for years and years. And, of course, Bobby Christina sadly died of her own overdose in 2015. So the combo of Bobby Brown and Whitney Houston, awful.
Awful, but I'll defend Whitney Houston. She was a nice Christian choir singing girl, meets this guy, and he really ruined her. So I'll blame Bobby Brown, and she got sucked into the vortex.
She's responsible too. Last one, Mama June. Do you know who Mama June is?
I don't by that name alone.
She was a reality show star. And her daughter, Honey Boo Boo.
Oh, now I do know.
And she was a pageant mom around that. But here's what really, the pageant mom thing's bad enough. But basically, June was dating and raising her kid with a man who'd recently done a 10-year stint in prison for child molestation. What's more is that the same man, affectionately dubbed Sugar Bear, was doing that time for molesting Mama June's own daughter.
See that? I'm actually slightly speechless.
Unbelievable. That's ridiculous. Any closing thoughts, Richie, as we go?
Good thing I'm not God, because I have some real harsh penalties for some of these idiots.
All right, folks. Well, make sure you tune in next episode when we talk about climate change. I was 1 week early last week when I was saying that, but we're talking about climate change next week, and this is a deceptive term, and I'll explain that next week. It's a big topic ever since Al Gore's Inconvenient Truth documentary 12 or so years ago. But now we're talking about the new Green Deal, and we'll discuss that next episode. As always, please remember, if what you see or hear sounds idiotic, then we're just the guys to help you sort it out. See y'all next episode. Take care.
Thank you for listening. Please download, subscribe, share, and review on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, Google Play, and also our website.